autoimmune disease isn't always the symptoms. For some of us, it's the harsh reality of trying to explain to our families that some of the foods that we grew up eating, that are traditional, that are part of our culture, are foods that our bodies can no longer tolerate. At least that's the experience I had when I first got diagnosed. Amongst all of the different symptoms that my body decided were part of my new normal, it was also the harsh reality that some of the foods that I grew up eating were now foods that triggered flares, were now foods that made me sick. And having those conversations with family wasn't always easy. And that's why I want to have this conversation today for those of us who have food sensitivities and autoimmune disease to really explain how we can navigate this together. So thank you to everyone that's jumping on here live. Feel free to share any thoughts, any of your own experiences in the comments. If you're watching the recording of this, you can also drop your thoughts and experiences in here as well. And if you're brand new to me, let me make sure that I properly introduce myself. My name is Tamisha Campbell, and I am a nutrition coach here at the EBWH community. And something that I'm very passionate about is helping women with autoimmune disease and chronic illness really take the guesswork out of navigating what's triggering their symptoms so that they can feel like their old selves again, and also so that they don't have to feel like they have to constantly restrict in order to feel better. So thank you to Jenny and anyone else that's jumping on here live. And for those of you watching the recording, like I said, feel free to be part of the conversation inside of the comments. But I wanted to talk about today 3 ways that we can navigate family meals when you're dealing with food sensitivities and autoimmune disease. Yes, this also is going to be inclusive of chronic illness. Yes, this is going to be beyond the scope of only of women, right? There's men who have this, who have to deal with food sensitivities and autoimmune disease. Those who identify as neither have to deal with food sensitivities and autoimmune disease. But the reason why I'm framing this within women is you'll see in a moment about some of the nuances that happen that are often common to the experience of women. But I wanted to start here by first and foremost saying one of the biggest ways to really navigate these family meals really does start with ourselves. And number one is trusting what your body is telling you. And the reason that I want to start here is that it's easy to feel like the thing is outside of us. Like we have to think about all of these things outside of us, the rules. This is what's good for you. This is what's bad for you. This is what the science says. This is what the research says. But ultimately, I always want people to, yes, use science and research, and I am pro science and pro research. Let's just keep that 100 here. But I also say, the science and the research isn't always going to be reflective of all bodies and all people and all experiences, because guess what? Research isn't always inclusive of all women. And sadly, specifically when we're looking at things like autoimmune disease, it's just such small pilot studies and samples that it only gives us a small picture of what the reality is for many of us on a day-to-day. And that's why I say starting with trusting your own symptoms means understanding that you know how you're going to feel by consuming certain things. Yes, there may be things that when we were kids, we had without a problem. We never had experiences, especially many of us who develop autoimmune diseases and chronic illness older in life, right? I got diagnosed in my 30s versus I do know some people who have gotten diagnosed much earlier, right? But some people also get diagnosed much later. So because of those things, we know how it feels for many of us, what it means to feel good, and then versus what it feels to not feel so great, right? We know what it feels like when we consume something and we instantly have a reaction. We consume something that we're sensitive to, and the bloating starts, and the constipation starts, and the diarrhea starts, and the pain in the stomach, and we know those feelings. And trusting yourself means understanding, like, I know how I'm going to feel if I have too much corn. Hey, Sarah, thanks for jumping in. I know how I'm going to feel if I have alcohol. I know how I'm going to feel having these things. And I always want to say, this is not about saying these things are good or bad, because on the spectrum of good and bad, it really just depends on how that food how you respond to that food. But it's understanding that when you trust in yourself, it's a lot easier when people have pushback, right? When you have a family member that says, oh, you can have a little bit. Well, maybe some people can have a little bit, but for me, when it comes to eggs, I can't have a little bit of eggs at all. Like I have an instant reaction to that. And knowing that reaction and knowing, yes, I could have that, but why do I want a swollen tongue? Why do I want to be able not to breathe? Why do I want to risk having to go to the hospital, right? When you have these food sensitivities specifically that are so detrimental to your like livelihood, but also like your legit life, because many of us can go into like an anaphylactic shock. That's not a risk we want to take. But trusting in yourselves allows you to feel more confident to say no. you to feel more confident when people say, oh, you can just have a little bit, but you know that's not true for yourself. So that's why I always want people to think and start with trusting what your body is telling you, because you're not being someone who's being picky or you're not being difficult, even though sometimes people and families may make you feel that way, but that's not the reality. You're not being difficult, you're not being picky, you're prioritizing your health literally because you understand how you're going to feel and how your body's going to respond, even with a little bit of something. Like I have friends who are celiac, they can't have any gluten. A little bit of gluten, instant reaction, right? So those are things that you really want to be mindful of. First and foremost is trusting yourself, trusting your body, and knowing that when you say no, it's a whole complete sentence for you and there's no questions about it. And at the same time, while we can be unapologetic and say no, for the second thing that I think is very important when we're navigating family meals, because once again, we're not being difficult, we're not being picky, we're making choices because we know how we're going to feel afterwards. We also want to make sure we have conversations before that family meal, not during the meal. If we do have specific food sensitivities, intolerances, allergies, things that you know don't make you feel great, those are conversations that should happen before the meal. And the reason is it is easier to communicate ahead of time, whether maybe you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable like communicating in person, maybe you get a little nervous, maybe you find yourself trying to like appease the next person. So you're like, well, I really shouldn't have like corn because I don't feel so great, but like I don't want to offend grandma because she loves making her cornbread stuffing. So I'm just going to eat the cornbread stuffing. And if I get sick later, it's okay. Versus having that conversation with grandma early and saying, hey, grandma, I love your cornbread stuffing. It's one of my favorite meals, but you know, right now, I really don't, my body doesn't respond well to corn. Would you mind if I bring an alternate dish that I can consume? Yeah, grandma might feel some type of way about it, but the thing is you're not telling them that you don't like their meal. You're not telling them that their food isn't healthy. And that's very important for us, specifically us who come from cultures like Black cultures, who are often told there are soul foods and that our foods aren't healthy. That's something that often comes up for people. And that's where you will notice a lot more resistant with your family. It's not because they think, well, some people may think that you think you're better than them. It's not always that. Sometimes it's the simple fact that they feel like you're saying that their choices aren't healthy and your choices are healthier. Instead of saying, hey, I really do enjoy this thing. When I was younger, I ate it, but you know something, I just haven't been feeling so great having dairy anymore. So I'm going to bring this side dish instead. I'm going to consume this instead. How about I prepare the main meal and you can prepare some side dishes that you like. You know what, Auntie, I really like those string beans that you made. It's so good. Can you make those? Like when you actually work with people ahead of time and have these conversations, it takes away that defensiveness that people will feel because nobody wants to feel like they're harming somebody, but at the same time, nobody wants to feel like they're being judged is really what it comes from. And I say this as a person who understands the nuances of nutrition, but also understands the nuances of family dynamics, right? And we want to make sure that we're having these conversations ahead of time. Like I said, if you feel comfortable verbalizing them, if you feel like someone's going to be defensive or their facial expressions are going to throw you off, maybe you might want to send a text. If you're part of the chains, because I know some of y'all have family members where your aunties, your grandma send the weekly emails to the family. If you want to add it to the email, you want to add it to the group chat, the point is when you have those conversations ahead of time, it's not a conversation. It is a conversation. Let me just be very clear. It's not a me telling you what you're going to do in your own house, especially if you ain't hosting. Like I'm not coming to my mama's house and saying, well, this is what you should do. Because that ain't gonna fly, not in a Black family. But what you can do is say, like, let's have this conversation. How can I support you? How can I make it easier? And let me give another tangible explanation of this is that very recently we had a family meal. And one of the things that we end up doing is people know that I do have certain food intolerance and sensitivities. So they actually labeled everything, right? So like I knew what I could eat and that wouldn't disrupt me, I wouldn't get sick with, and I knew what I just couldn't eat. That way people know, like, absolutely, if y'all want to sit there and have real cake, because I'm just going to keep it real, vegan cake is not the same. I've gotten used to it because I can't have eggs, but it's not the same. But if you want to have your real cake with your eggs in it, you can consume that and not feel any type of way. And I'm not going to feel any type of way. I want you to be able to enjoy those foods. I can't, but I want you to be able to enjoy them, right? So those are things that you could help and support people by having those conversations ahead of time. That way people also can say, such and such is going to bring this. And then that way they know, oh, I'm not going to be like weirded out or offended, or you know what I mean? Because these things are things I can't eat. But these are things that, so I feel like I said enough for that point. I'm like, don't need to like nail that any further. But that's just something I just really wanted to emphasize, is that second point is really understanding that you don't have to really choose between your culture and your health. You don't have to choose between like appeasing people and offending people. You can actually have that middle ground if you have those conversations. And like I said, they're conversations ahead of time. And all that to say, the third point is the one that's a little bit more of the spicy take, but I feel like it's important to be said, is that not every environment is going to be deserving of unlimited access to you or access to you at all. And what I mean by this is that you can take the initiative and trust in yourself and know these are the foods that work for my body, these are the foods that don't. You can take the initiative and say, let me have these conversations ahead of time so that I can feel comfortable that there's going to be foods that I can consume that aren't going to make me sick, that I'm not going to have any intolerances to. I'm going to bring some side dishes. I'll bring the main dish so I can really be supportive. And there's still going to be those family members that are going to be their own, as we used to say in the military, effing program, and they're going to do what they want to do, and they're not going to be mindful of you. They're not going to want to change. They're going to want to do what they want to do. They're not adapting a thing. You get what you get, and you don't raise a fit. Like, there are going to be those people, and that's going to be the opportunity for you to say, okay, good to go. I won't be attending. Good to go. I'll pass on that holiday meal. I'll pass on that family gathering this year. And those are more difficult conversations to have. So I want to keep it 100. I'm not telling you those are going to be the easiest conversations to have, but they're important conversations to have, because there's a difference between you being flexible, you adjusting to other people, and then people just straight up disrespecting you by saying, I don't care. I'm not going to do these things. I don't want to. And they're welcome to not change. They're welcome to not adapt. They're welcome to do those things, but you don't have to be in that space with them. And I want us to get comfortable having those more difficult conversations with people, and understanding that everybody doesn't always have our best interests at mind, and everybody is also not going to want to make any adjustments or change. They want to keep things the same, and they're welcome to do that, especially if it's their own home. But you don't have to put yourself into those environments and into those spaces and make yourself feel uncomfortable, or make yourself feel like I have to consume things that I'm going to be sick later. Because like I said, some of us have more extreme reactions to things than others. Like for me, corn is less reactive for me. I just won't feel so great, versus eggs is like, no, my throat might start closing. So there could be times where you're like, well, I'll let some things go. And that's well and good if that's what you choose to do. But I want you to feel encouraged, as someone with food sensitivities, as someone with autoimmune disease, that someone with chronic illness, you don't have to do those things, right? Those family spaces should also be family spaces. And families care about each other, and families look out for each other, right? I know there's some of y'all are like, not all families. You're right. Some family members aren't the ones, which is why you avoid those spaces. So the last thing I want to say about that is that if the family gathering truly does not feel one where you feel welcomed, see yourself out. Feel welcome to see yourself out is really what I want to say. So let's do a quick recap, and then I'll open up the floor to any questions for those who are on live, or those who are asking any or watching the recording of this. You can always drop them below. But the first thing I wanted we shared is trusting what your body is telling you. Your body knows what works for it, what doesn't work for it. We could have a separate conversation for those of you who have had, like me, have had a past of disordered eating or eating disorders. You may feel not so connected to your body anymore. And we can have a conversation separately about like how to get back to that. But ultimately, like, we do inherently know what works for our body, and innately know what works for our body and what doesn't. And being able to get back to that is what supports you and helps you trust in the choices that you're making, and know that the choices you're making are made with all the information you need to make the best health choice for yourself. The second thing is having those conversations ahead of time. It makes it a lot easier when you're not in the moment to have those conversations. You can even practice it. You can write them down. You can like create a prompt for yourself. You can text it if you don't feel comfortable having Or if you have a really close friend or family member, practice with them. Have those practice conversations of like, if grandma says this, if auntie says this, if dad says this, if uncle says this, if my brother says this, like, how would I respond, right? Have those conversations, practice a little bit beforehand. That way you feel comfortable when you get the pushback, you know what you're going to say. And then the last thing is understand that not every space is going to be welcoming to you, and not every space deserves access to you. And in those moments where you've taken the proactive steps, when in those moments where you've tried to like create a space where everyone feels welcome, and you really aren't being difficult, you're just expressing your needs, and those people don't want to be accommodating, then you know that you've given them the opportunity and they've chosen to say no, and you can choose not to put yourself into those spaces anymore. So that's what I wanted to share here. Thanks for those who got to jump on here live. I know we actually, hopefully, I'm assuming because we're live this time and y'all are still on, that you can actually hear me. We did this video literally yesterday and no sound came on the recording. So hopefully that's not an issue today. Otherwise, we'll do this a third time, which is wild. But if you are currently a part of the EBWH community, it's a free community we have here. So we do have different conversations. Thank you so much for being part of our community. If there's anything that you want to see in the future, you can always reply to any of our newsletters and tell us, like, these are topics we want to see. If you aren't part of the community, you can go to ebwhcommunity.com and sign up for free. And we'll just continue having different conversations around autoimmune disease, chronic illness, and other topics related to how we can better support each other, whether we are patients ourselves or whether we're providers, are, we're advocates supporting our family members, friends, and other people, be able to live well with autoimmune disease and chronic illness. So thanks so much for watching. If y'all have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to comment below. And I will see you all in our next video. Bye for now.